off the puck, and Glenn Cross headbands to the captain, Jarome Iginla, with Bowmeister on the rush. Iginla in front, they score! It went off a skate! Jarome Iginla's mom! The milestone moment! 500 goals!
He scored prettier ones, but not many bigger ones.
They're standing in Calgary.
It's a great career.
He hasn't said it, but it's pretty obvious.
But the pictures say the words, don't they?
I think Jarome Iginla and some of the Flames are waiting to give their piece as well. Isn't this terrific?
Welcome to the Hockey Podcast. It is I, Kevin Olenick, and you can, of course, follow me at on Twitter at KEVOLE, Soundcloud.com, KEVOLE. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Kevin Olenick. Add me as a friend on Facebook, Kevin Olenick. Like the Hockey Podcast on Facebook, and follow podcast_hockey on Twitter as well. And this is the day... It's the day of faces of franchises making transitions. Earlier in the day, actually, let's go back because it's funny how things sort of sync and intertwine. It was back in December of 1995 that a legend in Calgary, or a well-known player, probably considered, you have to consider a legend, former Calder Trophy, Joe Nieuwendyk, was traded to the Dallas Stars for Corey Millen and a prospect by the name of Jarome Iginla. We never really knew who this Jarome Iginla was. He started with the Kamloops Blazers. He was a pretty high prospect, but we were all kind of curious. Later that year, in the 1996 season, he debuted with the Calgary Flames in Game 4 of the Stanley Cup playoffs with the Chicago Blackhawks, and then went on to the next season to compete for the Rookie of the Year with one of Trevor Linden's former team, the New York Islanders. Fast forward to earlier to today, our morning starts with the retirement announcement of Jarome Iginla, which will be made official on Monday with a special ceremony. Later on today, about almost 10 hours later, we get the news that Trevor Linden, the face of the Vancouver Canucks for all of these years, as a player, and retired as a Vancouver Canuck, and then later as the president of the Vancouver Canucks, stepped down. So today our topics of the Hockey Podcast is responding and reacting to the retirement of Jarome Iginla, but also the late breaking news of the resignation. Well, we'll figure that's one of the things we'll talk about. What exactly happened here with this Trevor Linden signing? And joining me from the Bottom Line View, the one and only Mitch Milani, the second time on the Hockey Podcast. How are you today?
Pretty good, Kev. I'm excited to talk about the Vancouver Canucks. Haven't had an opportunity to talk about them yet. And, of course, one of my favorite players of all time, Jarome Iginla. It's going to be fun.
And, yes, it will be very interesting. And joining us as well was Beardy Canuck. Sean, how are you today?
I'm good, thanks.
Good. Let's get started here. And we're going to go backwards. Let's start with Trevor Linden. And I'm going to start by reading some tweets from Francesco Aquilini, the owner of the Vancouver Canucks, who has since actually walked these back, not after about 12 hours after he actually tweeted these. Sorry, I had them up and then I did not. Hang on here. Aquilini. Oh, I can't. How do we spell Aquilini here? What's going on?
AQU.
AQU.
ILINI.
There we go. That's what I'm missing. There we go. Francisco Aquilini. Sorry about that, folks. But let's read the 12 tweets that Francisco Aquilini tweeted out 2 hours ago talking about the decision that Trevor Linden has stepped down. This afternoon, Trevor Linden stepped down as president of the Canucks. He is looking forward to pursuing other opportunities and spending time with his family. I deeply value everything Trevor has done for this city and this franchise. He is tremendously popular in Vancouver, and for good reason. I thank him for helping us get to this point, and I wish him nothing but the best in his future endeavors. Jim Benning will now head up hockey operations and report directly to the ownership group. Jim came to the Canucks organization with the skills, knowledge, and experience to fully oversee player personnel and hockey operations. Jim and Travis Green will continue rebuilding the team as per the plan we have in place. A new president will be named in due course. I'm a die-hard Canucks fan as well as an owner. I love this city and this team. An interviewer at a business magazine recently asked me if I had any unfulfilled dreams. And I said, just one. I want to bring the Stanley Cup to Vancouver. I grew up not far from Pacific Coliseum, back when the Canucks played there. I used to park cars in our driveway on game nights. When I was a kid, Lars Lindgren gave me a hockey stick. It was a treasured possession. I still remember the awful feeling when the Canucks lost to the Islanders in 1982, again in 1994 losing to the Rangers. I remember the crushing Game 7 loss to the Bruins in 2011 like it was yesterday. A rebuild is a long, slow, gradual process. Everybody needs to be united behind the same vision and pulling in the same direction. Our fans are incredibly knowledgeable, passionate, and faithful. My goal is to reward their loyalty and passion by giving them the joy of watching their team raise the Stanley Cup. Following the June draft, we now have the best group of young players and prospects we've had since we acquired the Canucks. The post-seeding future is starting to take shape. The ownership group has done and will continue to do whatever it takes to return the Canucks to the elite of the NHL. I'm confident we are progressing along that road. 56 minutes later of this recording, Aquilini tweets, a further note on Trevor Linden today, I misspoke when I said he stepped down, and it's been pointed out to me that we made it sound like he's a quitter. He's never been a quitter on or off the ice. We parted ways amicably, and I wish him only the best. So let's look at the definition of amicably, because this has been a word used quite a bit in this. Amicably, according to the dictionary, is an adverb in a friendly and peaceful manner. So was this amicably? What are your reactions of what has happened here?
I think that this was not necessarily friendly between the two, but I think they're trying to make it sound as peaceful as possible. I think that there definitely has to have been some disagreements on some very big decisions that the Canucks have made between Linden and the ownership, and then possibly Benning as well. And that at a certain point, Linden just decided that it wasn't the best interest of for him to continue on as president, and when he didn't have the backing of the ownership in terms of the vision that he had, and then they just decided to make it a mutual parting of ways.
Just to back up Sean there, I think he pretty much nailed it. It's just covering up the fact that this guy is a legend of the team, Trevor Linden, and probably obviously had some disagreements with what the Canucks were doing and what they wanted to do going forward. So probably Linden just stepped down and said, I've had enough of this. I'm not doing this anymore. And it's probably the Canucks way of covering this up and saying, hey, we're still friendly. This is a legend of our team. We don't want our fans to be mad at us because of this. So we're just going to move on. And that's how we're going to say it.
But the early fan reaction hasn't been, we're really angry at, we're not upset that he's gone. We're actually, I would venture to guess that some people are actually starting to throw him under the bus already. I feel like that a lot of people have said that it's going one or two ways. There's been some people that are like, it seems like Trevor Linden might be the only sane person in this management group. He may have had some questions on some signings that have been made. We'll get into those signings and all of that. There's another side that said they don't really understand what Trevor Linden's real role with this team was. Was it a PR move because at the time there was a lot of heat? Correct me if I'm wrong. This was just after the Torts era, which was in the Luongo trade. That was Mike Gillis. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? Yes.
Yeah. Kevel, and you're nailing it where I'm at. I'm on the side number 2, part B, right there. So
okay, let's unpack.
I'm on the side where I have no idea what Trevor Linden has been doing for these years. I don't think, my personal opinion is that he has not had much of an impact on where this team has gone and what he hasn't had much of a say on these trades, these signings, these draft picks. I think he's been more of the face of the franchise in terms of delivering the message, being the PR guy for the team, not necessarily being the brain behind the operation.
I think Trevor had a vision, and he brought in Jim Benning to do that, make the vision happen. But I think that there was a lot of push from ownership that the vision that Trevor had wasn't the direction that they wanted to go. And the more Jim Benning got entrenched in the GM position, the less of influence that Trevor Linden had in the hockey ops, and the less say he had in the actual direction that the Canucks are going in.
To an outsider, if someone was just like, hey, okay, I'm kind of curious about what the Vancouver Canucks vision is, what would you tell me that is? What is the vision of the Vancouver Canucks?
I think that the Canucks are looking to get younger and faster, but I do think that that they're looking to get younger and faster as quickly as they possibly can, and that there might not be enough patience within the ownership, as well as now that Linden's gone, the management, to let the young players and the prospects develop properly. So I think we might see some young players getting rushed into positions again.
Yeah, Sean said that perfectly. I think usually the Canucks, they're a team associated by Aquilini, who it's just pushed from the ownership. I feel like with Aquilini, it's always the fact that he wants to get a playoff team. He wants to sell as many tickets. He wants to make as much money as possible. Obviously, any NHL franchise needs to do that. But with him, it just seems like he doesn't have a full scope of where this team is actually at. And it just seems like they're always pushing to go to the playoffs. They're always pushing to take that next step too quickly, even though they don't have the talent on the ice. They don't have anything really to put out there and say that this team is talented enough to do anything in any given season. It's just the Canucks are always too rushed, and they never take their time with anything.
Do you think this is what I feel Aquilini's perspective is he is looking at his numbers, his facts, and he's like, there was empty seats at the Rogers place. I get confused. It's Rogers Arena, Rogers Arena. Sorry, Rogers Place is the other. There's too many Rogers out there.
Way too many.
Yes, and now there's becoming too many Scotiabanks, but that's a whole other topic. But there were empty seats this year, a lot of empty seats. From Aquilini's perspective, I think he's questioning if this fan base wants to really go through the tire fire rebuild that fans have been clamoring for. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I think, yeah, there's a big disconnect between the corporate season ticket holders, where the money is, versus the average fan who voices their opinion on social media. I think the corporate season ticket holders, and then even if you take away the corporate part, but the season ticket holders are definitely looking for entertainment and competitiveness. While I wouldn't even say the average fan, but the vocal social media fan is definitely looking more long term and looking for the full rebuild. So and I think that's where a lot of us as fans and people who are active on social media are getting our spin, and all the opinions that we're seeing aren't necessarily from the same scope that maybe Aquilini and the management and the team are getting a lot of their opinions from, because I think there's definitely probably a vocal minority in terms of the season ticket holders that are pushing for the competitiveness.
I think my problem is exactly what you just said, Sean. It's the fact that they are even listening to the people in the stands. Like, why are they listening to the people in the stands? If you want to create a competitive hockey team, you should be listening to the people in your building who you trust and who you hired to create a good hockey team. Whether that's, in their opinion, to take it long-term and go the long approach, or to try and sign some free agents and be competitive this year. And if they feel they have a competitive roster to do that, I think that's exactly right. Like, there's two sides of the fan base. But then again, why is ownership even looking towards the numbers or anything like that? I understand he wants to make his money, but if he's really in this to win a Stanley Cup, you're not going to make a lot of money in sports, owning a sports team. You don't really make that much money, to be honest, especially in the NHL. So just, if you're going to go to win a Stanley Cup, go to win a Stanley Cup the way that the people you hired want to go to win the Stanley Cup.
But
I think he's trying to toe the line of doing that, but I think he still wants to. I think he's worried too much of becoming maybe a bit of an Ottawa, where you've got a lot of unhappy season ticket holders and you're going to lose them and lose the ticket revenue. So he's trying to play that fine line. But long term, if he plays that on the wrong side too long, it's gonna hurt the bottom line more than just going full rebuild.
Yeah, it's like, if you keep doing this, you're gonna lose the fans anyway, in my opinion, because fans are already dropping off because they realize that the approach of the GM, the approach of the ownership, has not been in the direction that they really feel is the best direction for the team. Even the team that they try and put on the ice every year, when they go with this sort of short-term approach, it's not working out. So, I mean, you have to try something else too, because the fans will just year by year by year just drop off regardless. So it doesn't matter. So
this is some tweets that they just came in an hour before they restarted recording here. This is from Jason Bruff, reporting from Farhan Largi. Farhan Largi. The tweet is basically, after meeting with ownership, Linden, quote, wasn't willing to put his name on their vision. And Jason Bruff's Twitter, Farhan adds that ownership may have believed that the team was closer to being competitive than Linden did. So it seems, and there was talk today about that Linden was pretty heavily involved in the draft process this year specifically, and he was also pretty adamant that they needed to trade Jannik Hansen. We heard reports of that. There were silent rumors about his happiness overall. So obviously we are seeing two people here that are not on the same page. And obviously ownership is seeing a team that is ready to compete for the playoffs. And Trevor Mr. Linden does not see that yet and feels like you got to burn this to the ground, man.
Yeah, I think Benning and Aquilini definitely see the kids, the Petterssons, the Hughes, the Bessers, like ready to step up and be the top point producing players, even though in reality they're probably 1 to 2 years away in terms of Pettersson and Hughes, and it's still up for debate whether or not Brock can continue on the ridiculous pace he had in terms of scoring goals last year. And I think that's just where they're looking at it, saying, well, we've got all these players and they're getting sold on the Kool-Aid of these guys are this good, and just expecting them to step in and be competitive right away, as opposed to Linden, I think, was looking at it with a more of a cautious approach, saying we still have to let these guys develop into NHL professionals and figure out how to play in the league and use their strengths and skills within the NHL, because it's completely different in terms of Pettersson. It's completely different game coming from Sweden to the NHL, and he needs to figure out how he can use his smarts and his skills in the NHL game as opposed to versus the professionals in Sweden.
Kev, I think this is a classic case of being in their own bubble. How can you look at this roster, take a step back, and say that this is a playoff team? Seriously.
I can't at this point.
I mean, unless they have multiple young players that we've never seen before step up and have career, crazy seasons, this is not a playoff team.
Yeah, they definitely, like I said, in Aquilini's mind, it sounds like they're expecting Pettersson to step in and be a top six forward with no real struggles next year, and they're expecting either one of Iginla-The or Hughes to step in and be a top four defenseman. They're expecting Besser to score 40 goals. They're expecting Horvat to score 30. It's just, I think there's too much expectations of these young guys for all of them to step up and make it happen next year. I think there's a decent, better than decent chance that those all happen within 2 to 4 years, but not next year.
And you're looking like Pettersson. Everyone is excited about Pettersson, but and we talked about this as a possibility that he could be up for the Calder, and that's a possibility. We don't know what we're going to get for Brock. He's coming. Everything's looking good that he's coming back from an injury. But this is also a guy that some people want to pay $8 million a year for. Different topic.
Kev, I'll stand up for Brock at this moment because I think Brock is legit. Because when you watch him play, you don't see many players with that type of shot, with that type of ability to score.
I'm not
just
doubting
pure ability. I'm just standing up for the player. I don't usually stand up for the Canucks currently, but I mean, when you watch Brock play, there's just that rare ability to score and shoot the puck that you don't see very, very often. So I feel like he's not going to have too much of a problem coming back.
Right, but you're still dealing with a health issue and a big question of what you want to pay this guy going forward. Look in Edmonton what they pay for Leon Draisaitl and how that is already handcuffing that franchise already. Other than the fact that they don't know how to draft defense, but that's an entire different point. But you have to kind of, and I don't think that this has been talked about enough. I am curious what Quinn Hughes is going to be with the Vancouver Canucks. I think that I'm hearing a lot of things that this guy's going to be a star and his ability is going to be. I am
as well.
But I'm also, this guy is, there's something a bit, and I guess you can take this one way or the other. There's a brashness about him that he's like, from what I'm led to understand, it's if he doesn't have a chance to make this team legitimately, he doesn't want to sign and he wants to go back to Michigan. So to me, there's a bit of a red flag there with this guy that there's something not sitting right with me of how this guy is behaving. There's a bit of a red flag to me.
I think he's more just doing his due diligence because I don't think he wants to be stuck in Utica all season. I don't think he should be. And I think his family, his agent or however they call it in the NCAA, I think they're definitely just doing their due diligence to make sure that there is a plan, and the plan isn't just on paper for him to, even if he starts in Utica, to move up into the Canucks. Because I think there is a legit argument for him to stay in Michigan, play the NCAA schedule, continue to practice and work on his strength and physical maturity before he moves up into the pros. I think that's just what he's doing, and I think he's getting some smart guidance from his family advisor. And making sure that he's not rushing to move into the NHL or AHL before he's actually ready, and the team actually provides a proper plan and a proper pathway into the NHL and the Canucks top four.
Yeah, I think if it were me personally, I think he should take the time to get ready, because this is a guy that physically is not prepared to play against men in the NHL. I mean, he's too small at this point. I think he needs to mature a little bit, physically get a little bit heavier, get stronger. And then maybe he's ready to go to the AHL. Then he can play against guys maybe a little bit faster, a little bit bigger. But I think right now, taking the long approach is probably the best approach for him.
Yeah. This isn't, and if I was the Canucks, I don't know if I would be. I understand the temptation to rush him, but it doesn't always work. There's times when that does, and there's times that doesn't. And I think, I don't think it hurts if he's not on this team. I mean, there are some players on the left side of the defense. I mean, are they great? Not really, but you don't need him next year, and you don't need him to get blown out next year, which is a legitimate possibility, placing him on the roster from my mind. But like, I feel, I think there's some sort of bubble and a lot of rolling of the dice and expectations that I think it's interesting. Which leads us to Mr. Jim Benning. And I don't know about you, but I feel like whenever there was the same question asked, how Benning answered it and Trevor Linden answered it, it always felt like it was the same. I haven't found I don't have a specific quote that I have here that I've seen that necessarily proves that, but it feels like, it doesn't feel like they were on the same, Linden and Benning were looking at the game the same way. Am I off base there, or what are you thinking?
No, I think you're right on target there in terms of there was definitely way too many times where Linden would come out and say something, then Benning would come out and say something that would contradict what Linden said, and it just they never felt like they were on the same page in terms of communicating the vision and the direction of the organization to the media and the fans.
Is Jim Benning? Can I just say Jim Benning sucks?
Sure,
he's terrible. When did anybody think Jim Benning is a good general manager? Like, ever?
I I think his negotiation skills are definitely what's holding him back. I think his ability he's shown the ability to find good young players that can contribute, but but what's holding him back is definitely his negotiation.
He's shown what though? Like in the draft, he's picked decently well in the first round.
I would say he's had two very good drafts outside of the first round. If you look at it would have been his first draft. He got Demko in the second round. He got Triamkin, as well as let's see here.
What are those players?
Gustav. Well, Demko's still working his way up. Triamkin showed well, but the Willie factor came into, and then Gustav Forsling is looking like a decent player at this point, but again, you traded him away. So I think, I wouldn't say he's fantastic, but I would say he's average. But in terms of what's really holding him back is his negotiation skills. You look at all the trades he's made, there's been one or two that you would say are wins. And then you look at all the contract negotiations.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, I don't know what this guy has done in his career to warrant him to get this much time as a general manager of a team that he's taken nowhere.
Well, what were you expecting from Jim Benning? Like, what were you expecting?
Nothing.
Okay, but so why are you disappointed then? Because you've got nothing.
I'm not disappointed. I'm disappointed in the team for having this guy as their general manager. I'm not disappointed in Jim Benning because I know who Jim Benning is. I'm not disappointed in Jim Benning.
Okay, well maybe let's change the question then and ask, what are you currently wanting from the Vancouver Canucks right now?
I want them to take a consistent approach towards a goal. It just seems like every year the approach is different. They're always changing their plan. They're all over the place. I just, as a fan, I want to know if they are moving forward with this young group and taking their time to get there, or what are we doing? Are we because it doesn't seem like they're all in ever on one plan. If you were all in on going young and taking the long approach, you would have done a couple of other things in that process, like potentially trading away some of the older players on the roster or not signing some of these other players in free agency. It just seems like the team is always all over the place. I never understand what they're doing.
And I think that's part of the reason why we've seen Linden and the Canucks part ways, is that there was definitely a disconnect between the Linden camp and the Aquilini camp in terms of how they wanted to approach this rebuild. I think you're looking at Linden, from what the reports are coming out now, sounded like he wanted to be more patient and build it slowly with the young players coming in, maybe one or two at a time. While I think it sounds like the Aquilini, and I'm most likely Benning's on board with that in terms of bringing in the kids and insulating them with these older, bigger veterans, and then hoping that the kids can produce on with this in the insulated minutes. While I think Linden was looking more to developing them slower in terms of bringing them up through the system.
So I want to read this. I found this from nucksmisconduct.com. This was back in April of 2018 of this year, not just as the season was over. Trevor Linden may not be the GM, but he certainly seemed comfortable with squashing these notions. because losing the Sedins means that a whopping $14 million in cap space has been freed up. Jim Benning undoubtedly faces pressure to turn this team around, but will he cave under the expectations and spend like he has in previous seasons? Hold on to that thought. Trevor Linden may not be the GM, but he certainly seemed comfortable with squashing those notions during the Canucks' end-of-the-season media availability. We are going to be young, very young next year, he said. In one of the first quotes from Canucks management during the press conference, he mentioned Gaudette, Virtanen, who signed today, by the way, Goldobin, Leipzig, and possibly Pettersson as replacements on the power plays. That sure doesn't sound like a guy who seems all for chasing free agents. And lo and behold, what happens on July 1st, Sean and Mitch? We get a Jay Beagle, an Antoine Roussel, and a Tim Schaller.
Yeah, I think Linden's idea of giving the kids a little more leeway lost out, and I think the Canucks are going to try and be tougher to play against, and I think that's the route they're going to go for, at least for this year, and hopefully if they decide to go that route, let's see it go for a couple seasons, but I think we will see a much more just a consistent approach going forwards now that Linden's out of the equation.
No comment.
Why? Well, I mean, okay, so let's look at what they have. Let's look at some of the ages that they have of some of the players here. They've got Louis Eriksson, who's 33, Brandon Sutter, 29, Berchi, 25. I'm not sure what you make of Berchi. Gagne, 28, Roussel, 28, Beagle,
I think he's decent.
Beagle, 32, Schaller, 27, Granlund, 25, Virtanen, Besser, Gaudette, you got 21, Brendan Leipzig, and Brendan Gaunce, 24. So there is some...
I don't necessarily think, Kev, that the age is the issue. I think it's the talent.
Yeah.
I think there's a young team here, but I mean only you can count on one hand how many of the players are actually good players, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you would probably put Besser, Horvat, Berchi up there. Obviously, you got Pettersson. I'm personally a fan of Brendan Leipzig. I think that he's a guy that I think will show well. But yeah, there's still some work to do there. Yeah,
there is a young team in transition in amongst all that, but it's again it comes down to how they deploy them, and I think that we're going to see a very it's going to be very interesting to see the approach that Travis Green takes, and whether or not he will. The approach he'll take in terms of deploying the kids versus the older guys, whether or not we're going to see a very, very heavy offensive zone start versus defensive zone start deployments of the kids playing the offensive zone, the vets playing the defensive zone going into this season. So maybe this is a step in the right direction, but it's really tough to tell because there's so many right now we're seeing some mixed reports in terms of who was on what side of the youth movement and how they see how quickly they expect the younger players to step up and be major contributors.
Yeah, fair enough. So we talked a little bit about the signings of Beagle, Roussel. I think we all agree that Louis Eriksson signing was also it's a major mistake that's still holding them back. You had the trading of Hansen and Burrows. Coaching wise, maybe one of the rumors out there was that if Linden was forced to fire Willie Desjardins a couple years ago, he would have stepped down. I'm sure we're okay with Travis Green at this point.
Yeah, I think Green's showing what I think everyone was hoping that Willie Desjardins was going to be in terms of being a tough love coach, but one that works with the players to develop them. But I think again, this next season is definitely going to be a show me season in terms of how the Canucks perform. If they are bad, but they show some sparks of offense and excitement with the kids, then I think that's a win. If they somehow surprise people, that's the even bigger win. But if they play like they did for the most part of not this past season, but the season before, where it just was not fun to watch, then there's gonna be some major changes and wide sweeping changes, because there's going to be some very, very upset fans, both on the season ticket holders side, where they're looking for competitiveness, as well as the more rabid fan base in social media who are looking for the full rebuild.
Yeah, like Sean said, I think the team isn't really ready to win, but even if they're bad, but they're competitive and they play hard, then that's a win, I guess, for some of these fans that, like me, that expect this team not to be very good, but you just want to see progress with the team and the players.
So before we move on, if you had to pick a name that you would love to see as the president of this team, give me some names that you're thinking about or characteristics. What's the ideal president of the Vancouver Canucks?
Well, just in terms of name, one out there that is, I believe, looking for work or would be an upgrade, would be promoted in the situation, would be Dean Lombardi, someone who's done it before, has and understands both the whole business. I think would be a perfect candidate there. I think for me, I just want someone who understands the business, has been there before. Has an understanding of the cap and has an understanding of the way the game is moving, and understands that the analytics and more data is a good thing.
Yeah, I just want to see somebody that's looking towards the future and understanding the game, how it's been playing. It's been played on the ice the last couple of seasons, where the players are moving, where the athletes are going in terms of hockey players coming up. And then, I don't know, just like Sean said, a guy that's been there before, maybe a guy that's had experience with building a young roster. That would definitely be a plus. So that's the type of guy I'm looking for.
So not a PR move, but a guy that...
Not a guy that's just going to sit up there and be the pretty face of the team. No. Not looking for that.
I'm going to toss a name I don't want. I'm just going to say the name Chris Pronger has been bandied about. I think that would be an unmitigated disaster.
I like Chris Pronger as a player, but I can't say I would want him as a president.
I know that he's apparently loved by a lot of NHL people. There are a few people that I have at this very low opinion of, like, in terms of, like, just vile. But Chris Pronger is probably my least favorite NHL player. I think if his name was Christoph Pronger-Orov, I think he would be viewed a lot differently. He was one of the dirtiest players to ever play this game. He was a cheap shot artist, and yet we admired this guy. I just was never a fan of Chris Pronger, and I would not want this guy to be the president of the Canucks.
It really depends, because I can't say, because I haven't sat down and talked to these guys and what they view as the future of hockey and the team and all that stuff. Like, you actually have to go through the process of talking to the guy, and, like, from the outside, it's actually hard to call if Chris Pronger would be a good president or a bad president.
Like, he's currently the senior advisor of hockey ops for Florida. So, like, it's not like he's jumping in from being the policemen, the Department of Player Safety to this. He's already had some front office management experience, but yeah, I'm not sold on it. Other than it would be hilarious to watch Oilers fans freak out about Chris Pronger being the Canucks president.
Kevin Lowe. Just kidding. I'm kidding. That would not be your time. No. Did we cover everything on this?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. So let's talk about the man that on fateful April 2008 brought his team back on the ice, shook the hand of Trevor Linden and said, thank you. Came from the Kamloops Blazers, where I am right now, 63 goals in 63 games in his final junior year. Played 20 seasons in the National Hockey League. Played 13 with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Other than the last 2 years, other than 2016-17, he still was pretty productive. In Colorado, he scored 29 goals in 14-15. He scored 22 goals in 15-16. The roughest, he scored 50 goals in a time when, in 2001 and 2002, when it was actually illegal to score goals. A lot of people forget that. That was probably some of the worst hockey that was being played in the history of hockey. 2-time 50-goal scorer. A guy that assisted on one of the most famous goals in Canadian history, right in Vancouver. And a guy I have to say, in a national perspective, I was really disappointed of how little coverage the national media gave this story today. I mean, apparently DeMar DeRozan is still an important part of our vernacular, even though that trade was 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago or whatever. We still need to talk about it.
Kev, it's Toronto.
Yes, that's true.
Have you not learned? You rant about this every day.
Yeah, breaking news. You're right, Mitch. You're right. I'm sorry. Breaking news.
The center of the universe, Kev.
DeMar DeRozan is on the phone, and we must take time. Let's go to our report. DeMar DeRozan is currently using a cell phone in San Antonio. It is unsure what type of service that he will be using, but we do know that DeMar DeRozan has bought a cell phone. Let's go back to our national coverage for more information. Well, I think that DeMar DeRozan, I think that he should probably get the Virgin Mobile plan, because that feels like a pretty good plan. But, we haven't talked about Kawhi Leonard for 4 minutes, so can we get back to Kawhi Leonard, and then we can talk about how Kawhi Leonard and John Tavares are like the combined element of superpower, and what would happen if Kawhi Leonard played with the Toronto Maple Leafs and John Tavares played with the Toronto Raptors? Could you see an element where that could happen? Well, that doesn't seem too realistic, but I'm always willing to open up the door ideas. Jarome Iginla has retired. I've never heard of Jarome Iginla. I don't know who that is. Sorry. Anyway, let's get back to... I got my rant out. Anyway, my point is this is a guy that was part of the national landscape of hockey. In my opinion, 100%. I don't think there's a debate that he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. We've already talked about this, Mitch. It's a crime that Evgeny Malkin was not on the top 100 list. It is also a crime that Jarome Iginla is not on this top 100 list. What do you guys think? I'm sorry, I let out my Calgary Flames heart there. What do you guys think of Jarome Iginla?
Sean, you can
Well, I'll say that the 2021 Hall of Fame class is going to be absolutely stacked. That
Yes,
it's
it
going to
is.
be full-on Canadian team love-in terms of Iggy and the Sedins. And then as being a Canucks fan that's grown up in Calgary, you hated watching Iggy score because he was a Flame, but you had to love him because he was such not only was he played the game like the quote-unquote good Canadian kid, was willing to drop the mitts and fight, and was willing to halfway through his career too. He changed up his training because he saw the way that the game was going and realized that he had to drop weight and get faster. And that just shows how a smart player he was. And like I said, as a Canucks fan in Calgary, you can't help but admire him and applaud him on, as you said, a Hall of Fame career.
Yeah, I think he was one of my favorite players despite growing up in Vancouver. And honestly, Kev, Penguins fan, right? So I was really happy when he went to the Penguins. Because honestly, I mean, the thing I actually remember most about Iginla is, of course, his days in Calgary, and but also how important he was to the Canadian national team. He was always one of the players that was one of the leaders on the Canadian national team. He's always looked at as a leader, playing alongside Crosby for a few of those years, and then just through every generation from like 02, 06, 2010, through all those teams, he was there, scoring some of the biggest goals in 02, assisting on some of the biggest goals in 2010. So, I mean, Iginla was a great player throughout his NHL career who could do everything. He could be the guy that could carry a team. He could also be the guy that could assist, play defense. He could hit guys. He could forecheck well. I mean, he could pretty much do everything you wanted. Like Sean said, he could fight. So he was every Canadian. If you're a true Canadian hockey fan and what you want from a Canadian hockey player, you probably like Jarome Iginla.
Yeah, and I think to me, like you look at his numbers, they were consistent. He could drop the gloves. He didn't always win. I mean, some of his most famous fights was LeCavier. He didn't always win, and he never played with a hell of a lot of talent, quite frankly. I mean, he had Craig Conway and him are wonderful friends, but Craig Conway is not considered a top flight center. There was always the debate of why can the Flames not get that center for Jarome Iginla? Alex Tanguay and him got some chemistry. Mike Camilleri and him got some chemistry. But he had to play with a lot of not very talented people to get the amounts that he did. And he found a way to do it. And he was actually a fairly consistent point-to-game performer. 22 points in the Cup run in 2004. With the Penguins, 12 points in 15 games. 7 points the next year in 12 games with the Bruins. 9 points in 7 games in 08. 8 points in 7 games in 06. He was consistent, and I just think if he played in the East, I think a lot of people would give him more recognition. He played in the West with a little bit later, but yeah, I agree with you guys. I think he's a top. I think one of the favorite players, consistent guy. In my opinion. I think the Sedins are first ballot Hall of Famers too. I think the Sedins and Iginla should both be in 2021. We'll have to see about that. Hopefully that happens for both. But true legend, going to look forward to what happens on Monday. I certainly do not believe that Jarome Iginla is becoming the president of the Calgary Flames. I certainly hope that that's not the case, because I think that would not be a good idea. But I think he's going to get his due just desserts. And the one thing to connect it, Mitch and I have had this discussion before, and a former colleague, he may come back one day, Trent, always got mad. But I think the one thing that the Flames did right, that I think the Canucks made a huge mistake to tie in a connection here. I think the Flames, maybe too late, I will grant you, but they did eventually trade Jarome Iginla. And I do think that the franchise, I know that there's a sense of loyalty, and I know the impact that the Sedins have had on the community and the city of Vancouver. But I do think that there was a mistake, and I think the Canucks should have traded the Sedins. I know that that's not a...
I agree with you, Kev.
Sean has never heard me say that, though, I don't think.
I've heard you say it probably like more times than I've heard you talk about Jarome Iginla.
I think there's an argument to be made. I think having two guys like the Sedins, or even just one player play their full career with one team is a very special thing, that especially in today's in today's hockey. But yeah, I can understand the argument. I just think that having the Sedins finish their career in as Canucks, full career Canucks is pretty special. And had the Flames decided to let Iggy do that, I think it would have been fantastic as well. Unfortunately, they, as you said, I think it was the decision to trade him was made a little too late, though.
Yes, it was. It should have happened. Should have happened probably 11-12, right when. Yeah, that's when the team went through that collapse after the Dion Phaneuf trade. It should have happened around then, but it didn't. And I think the Flames paid for that a little bit. But, even though Jarome played on 4 different teams, I think people will remember Iginla as a Calgary Flame.
For sure. Yeah, he's no doubt. No, there's not even a question. He is a Flame. Yeah.
So I think that helps the Sedin argument a little bit as well, that they still would have been known as Canucks even if they went somewhere else. But
okay, Kev, you always got to get it over.
Just making another connecting. It's a connection. I will never bring it up again. Yes, I will. I will. Any favorite moments? Did we cover a lot of any favorite moments of Iginla that you had, or anger moments?
Well, I would say the Iggy goal in Vancouver is fantastic. The LeCavalier fight in the finals is pretty good, and then him leading the Flames back out on the ice to say goodbye to Linden it just shows the type of person Jarome is.
Probably 2004 playoffs against Canucks.
The assist, yeah.
And probably the assist to Crosby.
Yeah, I would say the assist to Crosby, of course, that was great. The assist on Jalina's goal in Game 7, that was great. The one thing that a lot of people haven't brought up, but it was really Iginla that rallied the team, because he said because it was the Canucks that scored with about 20 seconds left, and because Jovo was jumping up and down in the penalty box there, and Iginla calmed the team down and said, if you had the imagination of you could be here, would you? And they went out and scored really quickly. 50 goals. The 50 goals he scored in Chicago back in that team. That team was so terrible in 2002, but he wasn't. In 2008, at that Trevor Linden game, Iginla scored his 50th goal. Then there's that parallel to Iginla and Linden. And I think really also, I think their careers are quite similar. They both came from pretty strong junior Western Hockey League junior teams and right-handed shots and were developed the right way and became faces of the franchise. So I think it's fascinating that we're having a podcast about those two guys. I think there's an interesting synchronicity there. But
although I would say Iginla was much better.
Oh, I don't think that that's much of it. I wouldn't disagree with that. But I think that they were two very similarly played the game the same way.
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Anything else we need to talk about today, or?
No.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think that covers it.
All right. So Friday, just we are going to talk more about Trevor Linden and what's happened, because we're going to have Tyler Noble on. Because I suspect that there's going to be some other news that's going to come out with the next couple of days. So we're going to see we're going to follow the fallout for that. Mitch, what do you got going on in the Bottom Line View? By the way, tomorrow
we'll be recording some more team previews on the Bottom Line View. So if you're an NFL fan, go head over to the Bottom Line View. You'll see Kev Ole back for the first time in months. The first 2 videos are out: Miami Dolphins, Buffalo Bills previews. So tomorrow we'll be doing some more divisions and getting those out for you guys to watch.
Yes, as training camp begins tomorrow in the NFL.
Excited.
Sean, what do you follow you?
Bearded Canuck 03.
Cool. Well, great recording. Thanks everyone for jumping on. Of course, you can follow me at Soundcloud, KVOLE, Soundcloud, KVOLE, Twitter, KVOLE, Spreaker.com, KVOLE. Find the Hockey Podcast. Like the Hockey Podcast on Facebook. Add me as a friend as well. Thank you all. We will talk to you soon. Bye for now.